This is James Randi, and you're listening to The Skeptic Zone.
Welcome to The Skeptic Zone, the podcast from Australia for science and reason.
Yes, it's the Skeptic Zone, episode number 512 for the 12th of August, 2018. Richard Saunders here with you from Sydney, Australia. And what a wonderful week it's been. Science Week kicking off. Maynard and I were at several functions and events and shows and performances. More news on that coming up a bit later. But to kick off this week's episode of the Skeptic Zone, I speak to magician and general practitioner Vyom Sharma. Now, Vyom is coming up to Sydney to perform some mentalism, we hope, and to give a talk at the Australian Skeptics Convention, Skepticon 2018, in October. More news about that as we chat to Dr. Vyom Sharma. After that, an update to the story of Marilyn Bodnar, the naturopath currently serving prison time for endangering the life of a baby. What's the latest news with this story? Coming up a bit later on. Then it's part one of our Science Week reports. Maynard's spooky action. Maynard and I were at the launch of Science Week at the Australian Museum a couple of nights ago. Wow, what a great time we had running around chatting to all sorts of scientists. And this week, Maynard talks with Dr. Karl Kruszelnicki, part one. Part one, Maynard spent so much time with Dr. Karl, I'm going to split up the interview into two parts. So part one this week, part two next week. And also to a very funny lady, Alanta, Colley, who is a comedy scientist, talking about parasites. Yes, there's even humour there. And next week, lots more interviews from the launch of Science Week with Maynard. After that, it's news of the Bent Spoon Award and some of the early nominations for this year's award, which is awarded to the most preposterous piece of paranormal or pseudoscientific piffle. Who will be this year's unworthy winner? We'll find out at the convention. Then to round off the show, a little clip, a little snippet or two from the recent Mystery Investigators show at the Australian Museum, where Maynard and I performed our science routine with a room full of enthusiastic school kids. Always a joy, always a pleasure, and one of the highlights of the year. And of course, this past week has seen the birthday of James the Amazing Randi turning 90. But we really only became friends, I guess, after he turned 70, when he was about 72, 73, or something like that. So I guess we've been friends for quite a while. And, well, I speak for lots of people around the world. Our lives are different because of the work of James the Amazing Randi, that's for sure. So I hope you had a happy birthday, Mr. Randi. And, well, I certainly look forward to our next meeting, wherever and whenever that will be. But now it's time for me to run downstairs, and I'm a bit peckish at the moment. My tastes are all over the place. I think I'll have some white chocolate, which I really like, with a glass of champagne and maybe some ice cream after that. There's an interesting selection. While I do that, I hope you enjoy The Skeptic Zone. Joining me now on the line from Melbourne, it's an interesting fellow, folks. It's a combination between a mentalist and a GP. Vyom Sharma, hello.
Thank you for having me. It's such a pleasure to be here.
It's wonderful to catch up with you, and I'm sorry we didn't get a chance to chat last year at Skepticon here in Sydney. This year we'll make amends for that. You're coming up. Let's start off with that. Although you're a GP, and we'll get to that soon, I guess you're widely known in Australia as being a magician, and especially a mentalist. Why on earth did you get into that game?
Well, the way I got into magic was actually much later than most people. I got into it in first year of medical school, and I think we were away on some kind of rural visit, and a fellow student just decided to, pass the time, show us some card tricks. And little did I know at that time that this guy was incredibly skilled at sleight of hand, and it was just one of those moments in life that just changes the course of what you do. Yeah, I was just confronted with just the absolute impossibility of him doing these absolute miracles with the deck of cards, and it just led me down this path of wanting to firstly just find out how the hell it was done. Because, that's really all it was. Not in a way that I was annoyed by not knowing how it was done, but I was just so incredibly astonished. And so it just led me down this path of discovering magic as a hobby, and then ultimately kind of performing it. And then I started to gravitate a bit towards mentalism, because I think a lot of magicians go through this phase where when you're starting out, you see a lot of magic, and sure, things can levitate and appear and disappear. But there's this particular subgenre of mentalism where people seem to have kind of powers of the mind, which seems particularly impossible, which doesn't make sense when you think about it, because there shouldn't really be grades to impossibility. But there's something about mentalism which is so incredibly persuasive that really drew me in, and I started to learn a lot of the techniques. And then I really found out I enjoyed kind of performing it, and for some reason the impact when performing mentalism is doubled, almost no matter who you're kind of performing for, and so it's something I've done a lot of.
I agree. I mean, over the years, I've come to understand and appreciate and learn a lot of magic and mentalism. But there is something about mentalism. It's a cut above, I think. It's a wonderful branch of the conjuring arts. And our good friend Lawrence Lung is also a wonderful mentalist. He does a funny show too. But when we think of magicians and mentalists, we have to mention the amazing James Randi, who just turned 90, by the way.
Happy birthday.
Happy birthday, James Randi, indeed. And I've been in his presence many times, but when he's does mentalism, I mean, he does sleight of hands, he does wonderful card tricks, which floors everybody, but then he'll do a mentalism turn, a book trick or a book reading or something like that. And that's where people really gasp. And I think that's just a wonderful art form.
It really is. And even before I started magic, I realized I'd seen some feats of mentalism in the past. So as a kid, I'd seen Uri Geller bend spoons and do his TV special and everything. That's right. And you're right to scoff.
Oh.
And and as I don't know how old I was, maybe 9 or 10 or whatever. Like it was. I mean, it was just absolutely amazing and stunning, and I couldn't understand why everyone wasn't obsessed with this. Wanting to find out exactly how this man has these amazing powers. And then I think at a time I did see James Randi, maybe on a morning TV show, just kind of demonstrate, I think it was spoon bending. But instead of with all the kind of theatre, he said, look, yeah, here we go. We'll just do it. And I can tell you right now, it's not done by magical powers. And It's a good 15 minutes of me just sitting there with this massive cognitive dissonance and going, what just happened? How? So clearly this isn't, magic or mind powers, so to speak. And so I really owe a lot to James Randi in that way, to sowing the seeds of skepticism. I think that probably affected my journey through magic.
This is a story we hear often, of course, and if you're listening, Mr. Randi, there's all around the world people have been inspired by you and will continue to be inspired by you because of all the works and the writings and the videos and so on. And speaking of videos, I've had the chance to peruse YouTube, and folks, I'll put a link up on this week's show notes. You have been on many TV shows doing mentalism and magic, but you were on Australia's Got Talent. That must have been a crazy experience.
It really was. Oh, man. It feels like a completely different lifetime, just because the TV environment is so, different to reality. It's, yes. It was the way it kind of went down was, so I perform either solo or as part of a trio with this group called Gentlemen of Deceit, and we've been doing the Melbourne Comedy Festival for several years, And then Australia's Got Talent, in a manner of speaking, kind of fell into our lap. And we didn't really think it was going to go anywhere. We just were going to do our initial audition act and see how we go. Turns out that went really well. The clip went viral. And so we advanced to the semi-finals and then the grand finals, which was an absolutely amazing experience in terms of laying out the rail tracks as the train's kind of moving in front of you, coming up with these new amazing and more impressive acts. So it was a period of my life where medicine really did take the back seat for that, whatever it was, year, 18 months. I was still working in drips and drabs, but that was basically the life of a performer and trying to, I guess, build that part of my career. Wild time.
What a strange mix of professions. What really, and I enjoyed watching your other appearances on things like Studio 10, the morning chat show, where you're doing wonderful little bits of mentalism and other magic tricks. And yes, you'll be appearing at Skepticon 2018 here in Sydney in October. And I see your talk is entitled "What Doctors Don't Know." What is it that doctors don't know?
I hate to say it, but a lot. There's a lot that doctors don't know. It's obviously, as you can understand, it's a topic that's close to my heart, but particularly as a general practitioner. The specialty of general practice is, the art of having no specialty. So by definition of being a generalist, you don't know. And it's something I'm now becoming increasingly familiar, comfortable being in a state of kind of not knowing but finding out. But it's something that's really struck me as very prescient when worth discussing. I think we've hit that kind of inflection point in the curve in terms of people's expectations from doctors. We've gone through that incredibly paternalistic period of the doctor knows best and doctors know because they've had the training, etc., to now everyone having in their pockets a device that can access just so much more information than a doctor could know, particularly when it comes to, say, something like general practice. In terms of rare diseases, our level of knowledge is quite limited. Our judgment actually might be very, very good, which is probably the more relevant thing a lot of the time. But it really made me think more deeply about what not knowing as a doctor really is about. So, I don't want to give too much away. I'm going to be touching on a few themes. I'm going to be touching on the fact that a lot of what doctors know, how it can become kind of out of date or wrong as time kind of goes on. There's that famous quote we're all told when we go to first day medical school, which is that, in 5 to 10 years' time after you finish your specialist training, half of what you know will be out of date. The problem is, we don't know which half, and some things just turn out to be kind of flat out wrong, so to speak. So which is always very interesting. There's also things I think about health sciences where perhaps there is an expectation, quite a reasonable one, for doctors to know what the right answer is, where I think some of the times we might never actually know precisely what the right answer is. The doctors may not know, are eggs good or bad for you, and which diet is better for longer living, etc. There's a lot of diet science is a really good area for demonstrating kind of the limits of our knowledge sometimes, and how facts can change just so incredibly kind of rapidly. So yeah, those are the kind of things that I'm going to be touching upon in this talk.
Wow, that sounds fascinating. Folks, if you're in Sydney, I encourage you to come along to the conference anyway. But if you can't make it, or you're coming anyway, why don't you have a chat to your local GP and let them know this conference is on, and we're going to have such fabulous speakers talking about these topics that might interest them very much. I mean, Dr. Brad Mackay will also be there, and we have other medical professionals come along as well. It sounds like it's going to be a great talk. Are you going to do any mentalism along the way?
Absolutely. I'm realizing increasingly in terms of my involvement in the skeptic circle, I think I think people just want to see some good magic tricks. So, I don't have any illusions about my prowess as a speaker. I think people just want to have their minds blown, and I'm happy to do that. But I always kind of like doing that in the context of the talk. So, like, for example, last year I was talking about kind of the limits of human beliefs and what it takes to kind of persuade people, and I did a demonstration with a voodoo doll, which has its roots in a form of alternative medicine. People thought it really had some kind of health benefits, like a health methodology kind of behind it. And I do this fairly kind of ludicrous and kind of comedic demonstration with a voodoo doll, and yet its effect, so to speak, its magicality is just so impossible and undeniable, and it really makes us go, well, when I'm telling you it's fake and it's so persuasive, just imagine how persuasive it is when someone tells you it's real. So I'll definitely find some way to crowbar in some mentalism. Don't worry about that.
Well, I certainly hope so. Now, I'm looking forward to your talk very much. The topic is absolutely fascinating, and it ties so well in with general skepticism and mentalism too. Folks, there's the clue, there's the message, and there's the word. If you want to see a very interesting talk amongst many, book your tickets now for the convention, and we look very much forward to hearing the talk by Dr. Vyom Sharma. So for now, Vyom, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Yvette Dontrema, aka SciBabe, and I debunk bad science for a living. This includes health, nutrition, and general BS on the internet. And I'm looking forward to seeing you all at Skepticon in Australia this October.
Now, here's an update to a story we brought you some weeks ago about the naturopath currently serving a prison term for endangering the life of an 8-month-old baby. This story comes to us from the Australian Skeptics website, skeptics.com.au, published on the 3rd of August by Tim Mendham. Naturopath banned for life following baby's near death. Marilyn Bodnar, an, quote, extreme diet, end quote, naturopath, who was acquitted of manslaughter charges in 1987 when one of her clients starved themselves to death on a water-only diet, has now been banned for life from, quote, providing any health service in any capacity, either paid or voluntary, end quote. The permanent prohibition order by the New South Wales Health Care Complaints Commission follows Bodnar's conviction in April with a 14-month jail sentence for advising in 2015 that the mother of an 8-month infant to cease eating anything other than raw vegetables, fruits and seeds to cure her baby's son's eczema. When the boy began a week-long bout of vomiting, Bodnar apparently told the mother to feed him some goat's milk, but the boy vomited up that as well. Bodnar is alleged to have told the boy's mother that vomiting is good because it purged, quote, the toxins that cause eczema, end quote. The mother finally took the child to hospital, where it was found he was only days away from death and may have suffered severe developmental issues. Bodnar was sentenced to a minimum 8 months jail. At this time, the Stop the Australian Vaccination Network organisation submitted a complaint to the Healthcare Complaints Commission following Bodnar's promise during the sentencing hearing not to treat children in the future. Ken McLeod, co-founder of SAVN, said, quote, the HCCC was probably going to investigate anyway, and they had much help from the New South Wales Police. The prohibition order is a harrowing reading when it gets to the suffering of the poor child, so be warned, end quote. But he asks why the HCCC did not impose a prohibition order after the first death. Quote, the Commission is to be congratulated here for their response to the danger to the health and safety of the New South Wales public, but we wonder why it takes the near death of a child to initiate action. There are thousands of life-threatening cranks treating the gullible all over Australia, and very few are challenged by the health safety investigators. Actually, we do know why. Health investigators such as the HCCC are starved of resources and finance. So if you want this to change, see your MP, end quote. A full report from a cloud will appear in the September issue of The Skeptic magazine, the journal from Australian Skeptics. That report comes to us from Tim Mendham, published on the 3rd of August 2018, and you can read that at skeptics.com.au, and as ever, we will bring you up to date with any further developments on this story.
Hej svenska skeptiker! Du vet väl att vetenskap och folkbildning inte bara är trogna anhängare av The Skeptic Zone utan också arrangerar föredrag, pop-science-quiz och skeptikerträffar runt om i Sverige. Gå in på www.vof.se för att spana in vad våra 7 olika lokalföreningar runt om i landet har på gång. Och om du bor i en stad där det inte finns någon lokalförening, varför inte starta en själv? Jag pratar med dig, Umeå. Hello all skeptics in Sweden! I'm sure you already know that the Swedish Skeptics Association not only is a big fan of the Skeptic Zone, but that we also organize lectures, pop science quiz and skeptics in the pub all over the country. Go to www.vof.se to see what our 7 local chapters are up to. And if you live in a place where there is no local chapter, why not start one yourself? I'm talking to you, Umeå.
Here's Maynard's spooky action at a distance.
Hey everybody, everyone's pretty excited here. I'm in a room full of excited people at the Australian Museum because it's Science Week all over the world, and it's even Science Week locally here as well. In fact, there's finger food going around. Thank you. How's the finger food been going?
Hi.
It's been going big. Great. Thank you. Yep. See, everyone's excited about finger food.
Sorry, my mouth is full of finger food.
Yep. People don't tend to not get so excited about elbow food.
No.
Elbow food just doesn't work at a party. As I look around the room, I see dozens and dozens of people that have been at university longer than me. And as we know, I was just there for the day, and it was mainly at the bar at Newcastle. But Science Week's a big deal. This is where we try and get a bit of attention to science and go, well, hang on, here's some people who know what they're talking about. These are the so-called experts. Give them a bit of respect and see how it goes. And as you know, every Science Week I try and bring a little bit of something of myself that I only partially know into the conversation. And tonight, the word is epigenetics. Richard, epigenetics.
Is that like in Scrabble, you get a lot of points for that word, I guess?
That's right, epigenetics. And it's not to be confused with the pen you give to people if they've got an allergy. Nothing to do with that either. Epigenetics is a inheritable trait that is not involved with changing the DNA sequence. So it's whether the DNA expresses itself or not. Oh dear, there's someone singing.
Uh-oh.
You know when you go to a pub and then you're having a really good time and then someone starts singing. No, just someone singing. It's, you know.
Well, there goes the conversation.
Well, particularly is it...
it's not so bad.
Everyone knows that scientists are hot for the track Easy Like Sunday Morning. That is the track. Everyone just loves their Lionel Richie. I mean, well, it's not really a launch of anything unless some Lionel Richie's playing. And besides, the scientists may finally may answer that question, what is as easy as Sunday morning? It's a bit like pie. Really, no one's actually quite got all the digits worked out. Just how easy is Sunday morning?
My Sunday mornings aren't easy because that's when I'm doing the finishing touches to the Skeptic Zone. Normally.
Well, see, there you go. You could be the exception that proves the rule. So, but I will be asking people that. But yes, epigenetics is what we're going to be talking about. Let's just see if this is a real thing or something I just read in the paper and thought was real. We're looking around the room. I can see we've got Dr. Jodie Rowley, who is the frog specialist here from the Australian Museum. We've Dr. Karl. Dr. Karl's there. I saw him with a Buddhist monk on Instagram just the other day. He's worth following on Instagram, Dr. Karl. And look, a lot of people, the drinks are holding out. It's always the strength of an evening as to how long the drinks hold out for the catering, Richard, isn't it?
It is, and the drinks are truly holding out. But we are in a room here at the Australian Museum filled to the brim with scientists. It's an incredible sight. It really is.
Yep. Hello, now we're talking a little bit of my wheelhouse here. Who have we got here?
Hi, I'm Alanta, Colley.
And you've been looking at the relationship between comedy and science. Is that because you can do both?
I attempt to do both and achieve neither, but I'm a science communicator and comedian doing a show at the Science Festival.
Wow. So what area of science are you working with? I imagine psychology would be a good one.
It would be a good one. Not so much. I'm actually doing a show on it's called Parasites Lost. It's all about the parasites that I've contracted during my work in health education around the world.
Oh, so it's based on personal experience.
It's based on personal experience, as every good comedy show should be.
Exactly. You basically take it and you inflate it a little bit. Now, what is the best part of the routine? Because also one thing you should always do, and for the listener at home, when you're interviewing a comic, never, ever ask them to do a piece of their routine because it's designed to be performed in front of an audience, not to a microphone with no audience. So we're not going to ask for any of the actual routine. What we do is we ask about what parts of the routine do you like?
What parts of the routine? I'll tell you that my favourite bit of the entire show is after the show. Every single time I've done the show, I've had people with their own personal parasite experiences come up and tell me about it. And there's one particular parasite that I contracted called Blastocystis hominis, which I've met maybe 9 people throughout the run of my show who've also had it and can't get rid of it. So they've kind of come to my show to be like, how did you get rid of it? And I have no answers for them. But I have connected them to other people with the same parasite so they can continue.
You have people coming up to you and showing you their rash and going, what do you reckon this is? Like, have you had this one?
It's only been stories so far, but I'm sure the rash is yet to come.
So how did you get these? Were you out in the field?
Yeah, I was working I've been working around the world in Uganda, in Kenya, and Cambodia, and East Timor, in health education. So I'm very bad at my job, essentially.
So what is your advice for people who maybe go to Bali and have a bit of Bali belly? Because that would be just a dream for you. That would be an easy thing to solve. What's the best thing to do? Is there something you should take?
Rest and fluids, like most things will work their way through your system in 3 to 5 days. But if it persists for longer than that, you should see your doctor.
Look, I had something happen in Bali, and I suspect I got it from, I think it's George the great gorilla that's in the cage there, because he threw a banana peel at me and he'd slobbered it all over, and I picked it up and threw it back at the gorilla. And I think I might have got some of that gorilla slobbery into me because I was really ill for 5 or 6 days. This Indonesian doctor came and gave me these big-sized horse pills, and I kept the box and brought them back to Australia to people who could speak Indonesian and read Indonesian. They have no idea what those tablets were. I can only assume that they were very powerful antibiotics that are illegal even in the Eastern Bloc. They were powerful. You
can get your hands on all sorts of things in developing countries. You can get ephedrine, you can get horse tranquilizers, all sorts of things over the counter.
Yeah. And so is it? So well, that's why you do it, obviously.
Yeah. I mean, there is a lot of logic in getting treated for an illness in the place that you contract the illness. Yes. So when I got malaria in Uganda, half my family was like, get on a plane, come home straight away. But it would have been a chaos to actually get treated for malaria in Australia because doctors don't have experience treating it. So if you contract something infectious, it's good to get treated for it in the area where you contracted it often.
And of course, have you had any ongoing symptoms from malaria? Because that can hang around for a very long time.
It used to. There was one strain of malaria called Plasmodium vivax that used to not be treatable, but it's treatable now. So there's much better treatments for malaria than there used to be.
Oh, wait. Oh, yes, of course. Where can we find you online to have a look at some of your routine and steal it and take it down the pub and do it on amateur night?
Well, you can't do that anywhere, but if you want to come and see the show, you can check out the Sydney Science Festival website and type in Parasites Lost. And I'm at the UNSW Museum of Human Disease on the 9th and 10th, and then the Factory Theatre, the 11th and 12th of August.
And how difficult is it? Is it actually a family-friendly show?
It is a family-friendly show. The only blue subjects talking about the secret sex life of parasites, as long as you're okay, which I think all children should learn about at some point anyway. So,
I think this is great. I really like the idea that you're doing routines about your work. It's great. Do you think you've got a few more routines in there?
Maybe. This year I did a show about my bees. I'm also a beekeeper, so it's called Days of Our Hives.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
that's great.
Fantastic, all over the shop.
So who do you blame for the declining bee population? Is it a pesticide thing, or are they just confused by us?
Well, bees are actually increasing in population in Australia. We're very, very lucky. But it's the varroa mite is this tiny little parasite that actually gets onto the back of bees and it gets spread around. But we're really lucky in Australia that we haven't actually let that parasite into the country yet.
Right. So that's it. I thought there was a bit of a pesticide issue there as well.
There is pesticides, yeah. There's no mystery about it. Neonicotinoids, which are used for canola, and others actually kill kill a lot, and it's banned all through the EU, but we still use it for our canola farms in Australia.
Wow, so don't bring bees into the country, people. We've got just nice ones here.
Exactly. We're very lucky to be an island in some ways.
Lovely talking to you, and see you online.
See you then.
Parasites.
Can I have a photo with you guys as well?
Oh, sure. Yeah. Look, because we're wandering around here, we've been lucky enough to bump into Dr. Karl. We're just going to go to a quiet area here, which is just behind the screens. It's still pretty noisy, but Dr. Karl, good to bump into you, Dr. Karl. How many science weeks do you think you've been to now?
Probably 20 or so.
Wow.
Since the very early days. The thing I like about Science Week is that it lasts for about 1.5 weeks or 3 weeks or a month or something. It's a lot of fun.
That is true. And I saw you on your Instagram account, and I recommend people follow Dr. Karl on the Instagram account because you were giving a water bottle to a Buddhist monk, it looked like.
Well, I've spent the last month in Mongolia and Tibet. And it's amazing because, firstly, in Mongolia, all babies are ugly. You're not allowed to say that a baby is pretty because, firstly, that will encourage the evil spirits to come and steal it. Wow. And secondly, it's an insult to the parents because it's easy to love a pretty baby, but it shows the true mark of a parent's love if they love an ugly baby. And secondly, there's no such thing as Mongolian lamb in Tibet, in Mongolia.
Well, we've had the speeches, we've had the politicians, we've had the sponsors come out and say their thing, which is important. It's what goes on at these kind of things. Karl, do you like giving speeches, structured speeches, when you have to do this sort of thing sometimes?
The advantage of a structured speech is that you can say exactly what you really want to say in the right order, with the right timing and the right cadence. So of all the spontaneous speeches, the prepared ones are the best.
Thanks, Karl. Now, you were saying you had been through... Now, I've just been reading a lot about Manchuria and how it changed hands with the Japanese and the Soviets and that kind of thing, but that's not where you were. You were a bit more to the right of that area.
Yeah, we were up in genuine Mongolia, and the amazing thing is that the Mongolians invaded the world not once, not twice, but 3 times. Heard of Attila the Hun?
Oh, yeah.
He got to Germany. He was a Mongolian.
Wow.
Right. And Genghis Khan...
Now, is it pronounced Genghis or Genghis?
Chinggis.
Genghis.
I was just speaking for the Australian audience, but Chinggis.
So where's his tomb then, mate? You should know. Where's his tomb?
Nobody knows because deliberately, when he died, he specifically asked that he be buried where nobody would ever find him because he wanted his legacy to be not him or his tomb, but rather the nation that he left behind. And so the Mongolians who buried him then killed everybody they came across, so there'd be no recollection and nobody would ever tell the story.
Wow.
So he's gone, and he built an empire that was twice the size of Alexander the Great's, 4 times the size of the Roman Empire, and they reached all the way across to the village of Kruszelnicki in somewhere between Warsaw and Kiev. And as a result, like 8% of all Asian men, have Genghis Khan DNA.
Oh, that's pretty hot. Yeah. Now, were they big on science development, or were they just sort of agrarian people with horses?
The latter, but with a good knowledge of psychology. And as I said, they killed one in every 9 people on Earth to build that huge empire. Wow. But he also did good things, like he banned, he banned kidnapping of brides, because his own bride was kidnapped when he was 16, and this led to division in the country. He brought in the first postal service that went all the way across the Mongolian Empire. He brought in the concept that representatives of other countries should be protected, and it's called sometimes Mongolian law, that an ambassador from another country is free of the laws of the country that he or she happens to be in.
Diplomatic immunity.
Yeah, and he also brought in the world's first trade free zone where there were no duties paid within the trade empire. So he did bad things, sure, and he did good things, sure. And it was powered, this is the amazing thing for me, by grass. So you go across Mongolia and there's just grass everywhere, and the grass got eaten by the ungulates, the animals with 4 stomachs, a bunch of stomachs, so the sheep, the goats and the horses and the camels, and they used these animals to then create the largest land empire the world has ever known. And of course, in the way of these things, it crumbled away and got taken over by other empires further down the line.
Now, wouldn't they have been a bit scared of lightning? Because there's no trees on the plain, and if you're the tallest thing, don't you get hit?
In general, yes. I don't know I haven't read about their feelings about lightning. I love their clothing. They still wear their clothing. The country is desperately poor. 3 million population, about 1/8 of Australia, but instead of a gross national domestic product of 1,500 billion like we have, or 1/8 of it, say 200 billion, they've got 40.
So is it a dual economy? You've got very rich people and very poor people like South America?
No, but you've got massive corruption. So when one of the big mining companies came in, instead of paying for the royalties for all the rich ores they were taking out, what they did was sign an agreement that further down the line they would make a loan to the Mongolian government.
Right, okay.
I mean, they could get that loan from a bank. It sucks.
That's a pretty poor deal.
It's a terrible deal, but the people are quite happy. And for me, the other really big surprise, besides the fact that all babies are ugly, and that men understate their age to appear more manly, while women overstate their age to be less attractive to the other gender, is that Mongolian lamb does not exist as a dish.
Yeah, a bit like all the Chinese dishes as well that we have, you know. They exist only on Western menus.
Right, so Mongolian lamb, which is thin slices of meat about an inch across, maybe 25 millimetres, it's highly crisped, fried, served in a very hot cast iron tray, which then sits in a wooden tray. That is actually a Korean dish. Mongolian lamb exists, but it's sort of like boiled lamb in some kind of soup, and pretty well everything you get is like that. On one occasion we tried to get fatigue-reducing tea. It turned out to be really salty, fatty lamb broth.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, but on the other hand, the people are quite happy.
Yeah, do they have a sort of a superstition there or something that you picked up on, a local sort of woo that they believe in?
They've got many. They believe that the land is alive. They're an animist society, and the land must be protected. They also are strongly Buddhist, which changes their thinking as well.
Oh, okay. Do they have the man-eating earthworm? Is that the one that is there, the Mongolian eating worm that pops up out of the ground and it's a monster thing? Is that theirs?
I think that belongs in the movie or the book Dune by Frank Herbert. Yeah.
Sorry, okay. Yeah, again, movies creating the whole thing.
Yeah.
Is it the most fascinating country you've been to, Karl? You've been to many.
Yeah, it's the last one I went to, so therefore it's the most fascinating. Well, actually, the last one was Tibet, which is also more fascinating. So they're all different in their own ways. A desperately poor country, being ripped off by big companies, will find their own way. And here's a weird thing. In general, the women are more highly educated than the men, because the men and the women need to be catered for in their later lives by their parents, and the parents always think that the guys can always go and dig a ditch, so the women, not being so good at digging ditches, they get university education. So the women tend to be more educated than the men.
Wow.
.2018 Bent Spoon, your chance to nominate an unworthy winner. Again, this comes to us from the Australian Skeptics at skeptics.com.au, written by Tim Mendham, published on the 31st of July. The Australian Skeptics Bent Spoon Award is one of the least sought-after credits in the skeptical world, or any world for that matter. It has been awarded every year since 1982, and it recognises the perpetrator of the most preposterous piece of paranormal or pseudoscientific piffle. Luminaries who have been past winners include Paleo Pete Evans, Larry Marshall, head of the CSIRO, RMIT, Julie Wileman and the University of Wollongong, Meryl Dorey and the AVN, also known as the AVSN, now the AVRN, the Pharmacies of Australia, and a psychic dentist. Nominations come from the public, and this year we have received nominations for the Therapeutics Goods Administration and the Australian Government for their list of, quote, permissible indications, end quote, how to create a list of the most ridiculous medical conditions. Inhibited water, anyone? Sarah Stevenson for her Sarah's Day podcast, in which she claims to have cured a pre-cancerous condition with a plethora of supplements, a dose of prayer, and her naturopath's seal of approval. Quabba Thruster fins for surfboards where the design will pull you through the water, defying all the rules of physics. We would love to hear from any other noteworthy candidates. If you'd like to put someone forward for this non-prestigious award, then go to the Bent Spoon page at www.skeptics.com.au for more information on how to enter, details on the current nominees, and a list of past winners. The winner of the 2018 Bent Spoon will be announced at Skepticon, the Australian Skeptics National Convention in Sydney on October the 13th and the 14th. Nominations close early in October. So there you are, folks. If you're in Australia and you want to nominate somebody for the Bent Spoon, go right ahead. And if you're coming to Skepticon later in the year, you can have the thrill of being in the audience when the winner is announced. Don't forget to bring your spoons. Once again, it was the great pleasure of myself and Maynard to head for the Australian Museum here in Sydney to perform the Mystery Investigators, the science outreach show designed for primary school and high school students. We have been doing this now for many years in the Hallstrom Theatre at the Australian Museum. Water divining, bed of nails, optical illusions, all sorts of mysteries and fun and games. While the kids poured in, the room was packed. And I'd started the show with an old favourite, something the kids don't know about really, good old spoon bending.
Looks like it's getting wiggly and bendy, like that one too. Yeah, a little bit. That's how easily you can be tricked and fooled. And many years and oh, hang on. Uh-oh.
Of course, the kids wanted to come up and get the other spoon and look at and examine them all, which is great. I guess they're just being skeptical. But spoon bending is an important lesson because it teaches us that what even our grandparents thought was wonderful and a miracle was just a simple illusion. Much later on in the show comes another old favourite, the bed of nails.
She's very nice. She's telling me it won't hurt. I hope you're right. Do that.
So I lie down carefully on the bed of nails. Maynard's making a fuss behind me. I lower myself gently down. Of course, what happens is Maynard climbs on my back and plays the trombone, standing on my back while I'm lying on the bed of nails. Never fails to get lots of applause and laughter from the students. But again, we make the scientific point about pressure and distribution of weight. Thank you again to the Australian Museum, and thanks to all the kids who came along to see the Mystery Investigators show.
So that's the fun, that's the adventure of examining mysteries in science, and thank you very much, everybody.
Hi, this is Dr. Pamela Gay from Astronomy Cast. Each week, Fraser Kane and I take our listeners on a fact-based journey through the cosmos. With our weekly podcast, we explain not just what we know, but how we know what we know about this universe that we share. Check us out at astronomycast.com and look for us in iTunes, Google Play, and wherever you download podcasts. See you online.
Thank you for listening to the Skeptic Zone. Now, next week, we're going to bring you part 2 of Maynard's spooky action at the Australian Museum, where he's interviewing lots of people. So, Dr. Karl interview, part 2, plus lots of other people who were there at the night, which we couldn't fit into this week's episode. Also, I'll bring you a report from Speed Meet the Scientist night at the Powerhouse Museum, together with some interviews including Kate Brown, the journalist, and Alethea Dean from the Australian Skeptics to talk more about the upcoming Skepticon 2018. Thank you to those people who chip into the Skeptic Zone at Patreon or PayPal. I've been endeavouring to put up more content at Patreon, actually, little snippets and bits and pieces to keep that more interesting. But all your contributions mean the show keeps going. If you stop supporting the show will stop. And we don't want that to happen. Or maybe we do. No, we don't want that to happen. So thank you very much. And thank you to my new Patreons over the last couple of weeks. Welcome aboard. Much appreciated. And because people have been requesting it, we're going to do one dice game. This is where I roll a die, and you use your psychic powers to predict the answer, which is in the past, because by the time you've heard this, I've already rolled the dice, but you haven't heard it yet, so it's in your future. Work that one out. A bit different today. Today's mystery number will be between 1 and 1,000, and I achieved that by rolling a 10-sided die 3 times. All right, here we go. So, use your psychic powers, predict that number between 1 and 1,000. Here we go. Have you got your number? The number will be 442. So, if you've got 442, well done. But for this week, I might do that again for fun. For this week, this is Richard Saunders signing off from Sydney, Australia.
You've been listening to the Skeptic Zone podcast. Please visit our website at www.skepticzone.tv for show notes, contacts, and to access the back catalogue of episodes going back to 2008. You can follow the Skeptic Zone podcast on Twitter at Skeptic Zone, visit our Facebook page, or leave a review on iTunes. You can also support the Skeptic Zone via Patreon or PayPal. The Skeptic Zone podcast is an independent production. The views and opinions expressed on the Skeptic Zone are not necessarily those of Australian Skeptics or any other skeptical organisation.
Now, all right, you people who listen after the music, predict again. This will be out of 1,000. Here we go. 593.